Again, we have some time for some quick questions directly to, yeah, I take, yeah, and then you.
Thank you so much. I think what you just said mirrors the outcomes of our yesterday's discussion. The idea of social union corresponds very well with what we talked about public services and the EU needing to move in this direction. Now the question is how to reconcile this with the subsidiarity, with the role of member states, and how to ensure that the EU institutions would even have the funds necessary to perform some actions. Should they directly employ people to render services, or what would be the tools that can move us towards this direction?
Thank you. Yes, Sister Ellen.
Very quick question. You mentioned that the transition fund was supposed to be 50 billion and that it's only 17.5 billion, but we need a lot of investment in jobs now. So can you say something about what the effects, or how could we increase that amount? You know, something about that just fund and the investment in jobs. Thank you.
Please, Mr. Andor.
Yes, thank you very much. Regarding the first question, I would like to emphasize the concept of risk sharing, because you know, somehow indeed we would need to reconcile the continuous functioning of national welfare systems, and I think in this regard the concept of subsidiarity absolutely holds. You know, in most European countries have 35–40% of welfare expenditure, if you also include education and protection of the environment and related items. Of course, the European Union is never going to be the provider of these services. So that's why the EU focused more on engaging in defining standards, you know, continuing identifying the best practices, providing recommendations, country-specific recommendations in various forms. But where the EU could do more without harming, but quite contrary, supporting subsidiarity, is risk sharing. A good example of this is unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance will remain national. At the same time, the EU can improve and define better standards and share the risk that if, because of asymmetric shocks, one or another country experiences a greater shock and unemployment rises further than what would be justified, there is a community support in order to ensure that you don't need to decrease the generosity which you yourself defined previously. So exactly at the time of crisis, people would need more EU support. And this is the concept of risk sharing. I think by this, the EU could add a lot to the good functioning of the national systems, and they would preserve their competencies and exactly the autonomy of the national welfare systems would be supported by a well-defined risk-sharing mechanism. On the second question, look, if the money is not enough in the fund which is designated to support the just transition, of course, somehow from other funds there has to be support. So the priorities of the Recovery and Resilience Fund would need to be organized in a way that partly they cover what is missing from the Just Transition Fund. And don't forget, the European Social Fund entails about 100 billion euros. So it was already the previous European Commission under Mr. Juncker, which increased the headline number of the ESF to 100 billion euros, although it is for 7 years. But make no mistake, this is an enormous fund. It's a big bazooka for training, lifelong learning, and helping labor market adaptation and delivering social services for the vulnerable. So a wise programming of the existing funds also can make up for the deficits which we experience here and there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Andor. I'm just checking if there is another question. Mateus?
Just very quickly, it might not be that many jobs in coal industries, but in many regions, these are union jobs. So don't we need, firstly, a social taxonomy at the European level to support the existing green taxonomy? And don't we need an institutional support for co-determination in these new sectors? Okay, there will be service jobs, but what the EU can do to safeguard that these are not just badly paid, non-unionized jobs?
Yes, here the key document is what we call the European Pillar of Social Rights. This is a document adopted exactly 4 years ago. This is more or less the taxonomy which Europeans in this field consider a main point of relevance. But then, of course, the question is how you implement these 20 non-binding principles of social rights. So earlier this year, the Commission issued a so-called action plan that was popularized in the Porto summit in May, and they wanted to ensure the buy-in from heads of state and government. But this is probably just a starting step. In reality, to make a difference on the ground, they would need to ensure that the minimum wage coordination directive, which is in the pipeline, which is now being disputed by countries and the European Parliament, succeeds. So this is not simply about the coordination of the minimum wage and ensuring that this also applies in the gig economy, because now the gig economy is the one which some people enjoy, at the same time also brings the risk of exiting the social security systems and undermining social standards, whether it's working time regulation or accumulating pension. So these directives, first of all adopting, then implementing, would be, in my view, the guarantees that the standards we all would like to see can be improved.